The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Antonio didn't open it right away. He left it on the table next to his cold coffee and went outside to look at the sky. He already knew what the letter said. He had been waiting for it for months. The sky was white. Not the clean white of clouds, but the dry, heavy white of a sky that had forgotten how to rain. The ground under his boots was cracked, deep, long cracks, like the earth itself was breaking open from the inside. He stood there for a long time. Then he went back inside and opened the letter. Dear Mr. Antonio Ferreira, this is your final notice. You have 30 days to resolve your debt or leave the property. He put the letter down. He didn't read it again. He sat in the same chair where his father used to sit. The same table, the same walls, the same land outside the window, except the land wasn't the same anymore. The land was dying. 3 bad harvests. 3 years of planting and waiting and hoping and losing. He picked up his coffee. It was cold. He drank it anyway. This was the farm his father had built with his own hands. His grandfather had cleared the land. His father had planted the first seeds. And Antonio had worked it every day of his life, since he was 7 years old, walking behind his father between the rows of corn. He knew every corner of that land. He knew where the soil was good and where it was hard. He knew which tree gave shade in the afternoon. He knew the sound the wind made when it passed through the old fence at the back. And now a bank in the city was telling him he had 30 days. He put the letter in his shirt pocket and went outside again. The farm was quiet. Too quiet. A year ago, his son Marcos had been here, 18 years old, complaining about the heat, but working. Now Marcos was in São Paulo, working in a factory. He had left in January, with a small bag and big plans. I'm not going to die on this land, Pai, he had said. Antonio hadn't answered. What was there to say? He walked to the edge of the field and looked at the rows of dead corn. The stalks were brown and thin, bent under the weight of nothing. No rain, no hope, just heat and silence and cracked earth. He crouched down and picked up a piece of dry soil. It fell apart in his hand like dust. 40 years of work. He let the dust fall between his fingers and stood up slowly. In the distance, across the fence, he could see the Souza farm. Old Seu Benedito's place. Seu Benedito had died in March, and his family in the city had sent someone to manage the property. A woman, people in the village said. A widow. She had arrived last week. Antonio hadn't met her yet. He hadn't left his land in days. He looked at the dust on his hand. Then he looked at the sky again. 30 days. He didn't know what he was going to do. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to make any decision standing in a dead field. He went inside, washed his face, put on his hat, and walked to the fence. The fence between the 2 farms was old. Some of the wooden posts were leaning. Some of the wire was broken and tied back together with smaller pieces of wire. Antonio had always meant to fix it. He never did. He stopped at the gate and looked across. The Souza farm wasn't in much better shape than his own. The same dry fields, the same cracked earth. But someone had been working. He could see it. The small vegetable garden near the house had been cleared. The dead plants had been pulled out. Fresh soil had been turned over in 2 long rows. Someone was trying. He opened the gate and walked through. The house was small and old, with a covered porch and a mango tree in the front that had lost most of its leaves. As Antonio got closer, he heard the sound of a hoe hitting dry ground. Steady, patient. like someone who had been doing it for hours and wasn't going to stop. He walked around the side of the house. A woman was working in the garden. She was wearing a dark blue dress with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was pulled back tight under a cloth. She was thin, but the way she moved, low and controlled, each strike of the hoe precise, told him she wasn't new to this kind of work. She didn't hear him coming. Or maybe she did and didn't stop. He stopped a few meters away. "Good afternoon," he said. She looked up. Her face was brown from the sun, with small lines around her eyes. She wasn't young, but she wasn't old either. Somewhere in between, like him. She looked at him the way people in the interior look at strangers, not unfriendly, but careful, measuring. "Good afternoon," she answered. She didn't smile. She didn't put down the hoe. "My name is Antônio," he said. "I have the farm next door. I came to introduce myself." She gave one slow nod. "Clara," she said. "Clara Mendes." A short silence. The kind that isn't uncomfortable yet, but could become uncomfortable if nobody spoke. Antônio looked at the 2 rows of turned soil. "You're planting?" he asked. "Trying," she said. "The ground is hard." He looked at the soil more carefully. It was better than his. Still dry, but there was something underneath. A darker layer. If rain came, this ground could work. "There's a well on the east side of the property," he said. "Old Seu Benedito used it for the dry season." "Did you find it?" She looked at him. "No," she said. "I can show you if you want." She seemed to be deciding something. Then she put the hoe against the wall of the house and wiped her hands on her dress. "Show me," she said. They walked to the east side of the property without talking much. Antônio found the well easily. He had helped Seu Benedito dig it 15 years ago. It was covered with 2 heavy wooden boards to keep animals out. He moved the boards aside and dropped a small stone in. A few seconds later, they heard the sound of water. Clara looked down into the well. "There's still water," she said, and something in her voice changed. Not much, just a small shift, like a door opening a little. "Enough for the garden," Antônio said. "Maybe more." She looked at the well for a moment longer. Then she looked at him. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Direct. No extra words. Antônio thought about it. "Because Seu Benedito was a good man," he said, "and because the valley needs people who are trying." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then something settled in her expression. A quiet decision made. They walked back to the house. At the gate, Antônio stopped. "I have rope and a bucket you can use for the well," he said. "I'll bring them tomorrow." "Thank you," she said. The words were simple, but she said them like she meant them. He walked back through the gate and across to his own land. That night he sat on the porch and looked at the dark field. The letter was still in his shirt pocket. 30 days. He took it out and read it again, slowly, in the light of the small lamp beside the door. He thought about his father. His father had faced bad years, too. There were stories. Years of drought, years of debt, years when the family ate only what the garden gave. But his father never left. He always said the same thing. The land doesn't abandon those who don't abandon it. Antônio had believed that his whole life. Now he wasn't sure. He folded the letter and put it back in his pocket. He looked at the sky. No stars tonight. Thick clouds had moved in from the north. That could mean rain, or it could mean nothing. In a year like this, you couldn't trust the sky. He went inside and lay down on the bed. He didn't sleep for a long time. But for the first time in weeks, His mind wasn't only on the debt and the dead crops and the empty house. It was also on a woman with a hoe and careful eyes, turning dry soil with patient hands. Trying. He brought the rope and bucket the next morning. Clara was already awake. The small fire outside the kitchen was burning, and he could smell coffee. She came to the door when she heard his boots on the dry ground. She looked at the rope and bucket in his hands. Then she looked at him. "Come in," she said. "Coffee is ready?" The kitchen was small. A wood stove, 2 chairs, a table with a crack down the middle, a clay pot, a tin cup. Everything clean, but worn. The kind of clean that comes from not having much and taking care of what you have. She poured 2 cups and sat down. He sat across from her. They drank in silence for a moment. The coffee was strong and bitter. "Good. You've done this before," Antônio said. "Worked land like this." She wrapped both hands around the cup. "My husband had a small farm in the south of Minas," she said, "before he went to work in the city. We had 3 years there. Good years." "What happened?" he asked. She looked at the table. He went to work on a construction site in Belo Horizonte. "Better money," he said. He was going to save enough to buy more land. She paused. "He died in an accident, 8 months after he left." Antônio said nothing. There was nothing useful to say. "And you?" she asked after a moment. She looked up. "You live alone next door." It wasn't a question exactly, but it needed an answer. "My wife died 2 years ago," he said. "Fever. My son left for São Paulo in January. She took this in slowly. So we're both alone," she said. It wasn't sad the way she said it. It was just a fact. 2 people looking at the same situation clearly. "Yes," Antônio said. "I suppose we are." She stood up and took the cups to the basin. The conversation was over, not because it was uncomfortable, but because she was a person who didn't stay in words longer than necessary. She moved back to the door and looked at the garden. "I need to move water from the well to the garden today," she said. "It's a long way to carry it." Antônio stood up. "I can help," he said. She looked at him. "You have your own land to worry about." He thought about the dead fields, the letter in his pocket, the 30 days. "My land can wait a few hours," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up the empty bucket from the table and handed it to him. They worked through the morning. Antônio carried water from the well. Clara poured it carefully around the roots of the plants she had already put in. Tomatoes, green onions, a small row of beans. She didn't waste a single drop. Each plant got exactly what it needed. No more. He watched her work without meaning to. She moved like someone who had learned to be careful with everything. Water, words, energy. Like someone who knew that nothing lasts forever, and nothing should be wasted. At one point, she caught him looking. "What?" she said. Not angry, just direct. "You're good at this," he said. She didn't answer right away. She poured the last of the water around a tomato plant and stood up straight, pressing one hand to her lower back. "I don't have a choice," she said finally. "If I don't make this garden work, I don't eat. It's simple." Antônio understood that kind of simple. They stopped at midday. Clara had bread and dried meat inside. She put it on the table without asking if he was hungry. He sat down and ate. Between bites, she asked, "How bad is it? Your situation?" She met his eyes without looking away. He had the feeling she wouldn't accept a soft answer. "Bad," he said. 3 bad harvests. The bank wants the land in 30 days if I can't pay." She was quiet for a moment. "How much do you owe?" he told her. She didn't react with pity. She didn't say, "Oh, how terrible." She just thought about it in silence. "Can you sell anything? Tools? Animals?" "I have 2 mules," he said. "Some tools. It wouldn't be enough. Is there anyone who could lend you money?" He shook his head. "No family. And people around here don't have money to lend. Not this year." She tore a piece of bread slowly. "What does the bank want? Just money or the land itself?" Antonio looked at her. Most people didn't ask that question. Most people stopped at the debt. "The land," he said quietly. "There's a man in the city, a businessman. He's been trying to buy this valley for years. He wants to build something here. The bank belongs to his brother-in-law." Clara put the bread down. "So the debt is the excuse," she said. "Yes," Antonio said. "I think so." She looked at the wall for a moment. Then she looked back at him. "Have you talked to anyone? A lawyer? The church?" "No," he said. She gave one slow nod. "Then maybe that's where you start," she said. "Not with the land, with the people." He looked at her. She picked up her bread again and ate, like she hadn't just said something that shifted something inside him. Outside, the wind was picking up. Not a cool wind, a dry, restless wind that moved the dust around without bringing any relief. But it was movement. After weeks of complete stillness, even dry wind felt like something. Antonio walked home in the early afternoon. He didn't go to the dead field. He went inside, sat at the table, and wrote a letter. Not to the bank. To Padre Ignazio in the village. The old priest who had baptized him, who had buried his wife, who knew everyone in the valley. He wrote slowly, choosing each word. When he finished, he read it back. It was a simple letter. He explained the situation. He asked for help. Not money, just advice. Just someone who knew the right people. He folded the letter and set it by the door to take to the village in the morning. Then he sat back and thought about Clara Mendez. About the way she asked questions like she already knew the answers weren't going to be easy, and she was asking anyway. About the way she didn't waste words or water or time. About what she had said. Not with the land, with the people. He hadn't thought about the people in a long time. He had been so alone for so long that he had forgotten. You don't survive a drought alone. You survive it together. He looked at the letter by the door. Maybe it wasn't too late to remember that. Padre Ignazio answered in 4 days. The letter came back with a boy from the village, 12 years old, barefoot, who handed it to Antonio at the gate and ran back down the road without waiting for a response. Antonio opened it standing right there. The handwriting was small and careful, the way old men write when their hands still work but don't hurry anymore. Antonio, come to the village on Saturday. Bring everything you have, the bank letters, the dates, the numbers. I know a man in Diamantina who has helped people in situations like yours. He is not a lawyer, but he knows the law. Don't sell the mules yet. Don't sign anything. Come Saturday. Padre Ignazio. Antonio read it twice. Then he folded it and put it in his shirt pocket, next to the bank letter. He stood at the gate for a long moment, looking at his land. Don't sign anything. He hadn't planned to, but it was different to hear it said by someone else. It meant he wasn't invisible. It meant someone knew he existed, and that what was happening to him was wrong. He went to tell Clara. She was at the well, pulling up a bucket of water. She listened without stopping what she was doing. When he finished, she set the bucket down and looked at him. Good, she said. Saturday is 3 days away. What are you going to do until then? He hadn't thought about that. I don't know, he admitted. Clara picked up the bucket. Come help me with the garden, she said. Thinking is easier when your hands are busy. It was true. He had always known that, but he had forgotten it somewhere in the weeks of sitting alone and worrying. They worked through the afternoon. The tomato plants were growing, small and fragile, but alive. Green in all that dry brown. Clara had also planted squash along the east wall of the house, where the shade came in the late afternoon to protect the roots from the worst of the heat. She knew what she was doing. At one point, Antônio stopped and looked at the garden. It's working, he said. She was kneeling, pressing soil around a small plant. She didn't look up. Not yet, she said, but it's trying. He thought about that. The difference between working and trying. Working meant it was already done. Trying meant it was still uncertain, still at risk, but still alive. He preferred trying. It was more honest. As the afternoon cooled, they sat on the porch steps. Clara had water in a clay cup. He had nothing, and she handed him the cup without a word. He drank and handed it back. Can I ask you something? He said. You're going to ask anyway, she said. So ask. He almost smiled. Why did you come here? To this farm, this valley? You could have gone somewhere else, a town. Found work in a house, in a kitchen. She was quiet for a moment. She looked at the dry hills in the distance. I tried that, she said. After my husband died, I went to Belo Horizonte, worked in a house for a year, cooking, cleaning. The family was not bad, but every day I woke up inside 4 walls that weren't mine, cooking food I wasn't going to eat, cleaning rooms I wasn't going to sleep in. She paused. I felt like I was disappearing. Antônio understood that too. Not the city part. He had never lived in a city, but the disappearing part. When Seu Benedito's family sent a letter to the church looking for someone to manage the property, a priest in Belo Horizonte told me about it. Said it was hard land in a dry year, far from everything, no guarantees. She looked down at her hands. I said yes before he finished talking. Why? Antônio asked. Because it was mine to try, she said simply. Even if I fail, it's my failure. On my own land, with my own hands. That's different from disappearing inside someone else's house. Antônio looked at his own hands. Calloused, cracked at the knuckles. His father's hands, people used to say. I think my father would have understood you, he said. She looked at him. What was he like? Hard, Antônio said, but fair. He never complained. Even in the worst years, he always found something to do. Something to fix, something to plant, something to build. He said that a man who stops moving stops living. She took this in quietly. My mother was like that, she said. She raised 4 children alone after my father left. Never once said life was unfair, just kept moving. They were quiet for a moment. A bird called somewhere in the dry trees, a sound thin and far away, but real. Do you think we can do it? Antônio asked. He wasn't sure why he asked her. Maybe because she was the only person around to ask. Maybe because she seemed like someone who gave honest answers. She thought about it seriously, not rushing to say yes to make him feel better. I think you can fight for your land, she said finally. Whether you win or not, I don't know. But I think you can fight. She looked at him. And I think that matters. Even if you lose, it matters that you didn't just walk away. Antônio felt something shift in his chest. Not hope exactly. Something quieter than hope. Something more solid. They sat in silence until the light started to fade. Then Antonio stood up and said goodnight. Walking back across the dry field to his house, he noticed something he hadn't noticed in weeks. He wasn't thinking about the debt. He was thinking about Saturday, about Padre Ignazio's letter, about the man in Diamantina who knew the law, about the tomato plants, small and green in all that brown, about Clara's hands around a clay cup, about his father walking between rows of corn on a morning just like this one, not stopping, not complaining, just moving. He went inside. He didn't write any letters that night. He didn't read the bank letter again. He went to bed early, and for the first time in months, he slept. Saturday came with clouds, not the heavy, hopeful clouds of rain. Thin clouds, high and fast, the kind that cross the sky without stopping. But they blocked the worst of the sun, and the morning was cooler than it had been in weeks. Antonio woke up early. He washed his face, put on his cleanest shirt, and gathered everything on the table. The bank letters, all 3 of them, in order of date. The numbers he had written on a separate piece of paper. The original document from when his father had bought the land, folded carefully inside an old cloth. He looked at everything laid out on the table. His whole life, reduced to a few pieces of paper. He heard boots on the dry ground outside, a knock at the door. He opened it. Clara was standing there in a dark dress, hair pulled back neatly. She was carrying a cloth bag. "I'm coming with you," she said. It wasn't a question. Antonio looked at her. "You don't have to," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm coming anyway." He didn't argue. He wasn't sure he wanted to. They walked to the village together. It was about 4 kilometers, a long walk in the heat, but the thin clouds made it bearable. They didn't talk much on the way. Clara walked at the same pace as him, not too fast, not too slow. She didn't fill the silence with words that weren't needed. He was starting to understand that about her. She only spoke when she had something to say. The village was small. A main street of packed dirt, a church, a general store, 20 or so houses. A few people looked at them as they passed. Antonio nodded. Some nodded back. Some just watched. Padre Ignazio was waiting at the church. He was older than Antonio remembered, thinner, with white hair and a slight bend in his back. But his eyes were sharp, and his handshake was firm. "Antonio," he said. "Good. You came." He looked at Clara. "And who is this?" "Clara Mendes," she said before Antonio could speak. "I manage the Sousa farm next door to his. I came to listen and help if I can." Padre Ignacio looked at her for a moment. Then he gave one slow nod, like he had decided something. "Good," he said again. "Come inside." The inside of the church was cool and smelled of candle wax. They sat at a small table near the altar, Antonio, Clara, and Padre Ignacio. The priest poured water from a clay jug and pushed the cups toward them. "Show me everything," he said. Antonio laid out the papers on the table, the letters, the numbers, the original land document. Padre Ignazio put on a pair of old glasses and read slowly, moving from one paper to the next without speaking. Clara sat with her hands folded on the table. She didn't move with worry. She didn't whisper to Antonio. She just waited, watching the old priest's face. After a long time, Padre Ignazio took off his glasses and looked up. "The debt is real," he said. "But the timeline is wrong." He touched one of the letters. "According to the original loan agreement, you have 90 days from the date of final notice, not 30. They wrote 30 days hoping you wouldn't know the difference." Antonio felt something cold move through him. 90 days, he repeated. 90, Padre Inácio said. That gives us time. He looked at Clara, then back at Antonio. I wrote to my contact in Diamantina. He says this kind of thing is happening in other valleys, too. The same businessmen, different banks, different debts. He is building a case. If you are willing to add your name to it, it could help you and help the others. Antonio looked at the papers on the table. Adding his name meant becoming visible. It meant the businessman would know he was fighting. It meant risk. What happens if we lose? He asked. Padre Inácio was quiet for a moment. You lose the land, he said. He wasn't going to soften it. But if you do nothing, you lose it anyway. At least this way you lose it fighting. Antonio looked at Clara. She met his eyes and gave one small nod. Not telling him what to do, just telling him she was there. He turned back to Padre Inácio. Add my name, he said. The old priest gave a firm nod. Good. He gathered the papers carefully. I'll make copies and send everything to Diamantina this week. In the meantime, he looked at Antonio over the top of his glasses. Is there anything you can harvest? Anything at all? Antonio thought about his dead fields. Almost nothing, he said. Maybe some beans from the edge plot, near the creek. The soil is better there. Clara leaned forward slightly. He also has 2 mules in good shape, she said, and tools. If he rents the mules out to other farmers for the next 2 months, it won't solve everything, but it helps. Padre Inácio looked at her with something close to approval. You've thought about this, he said. On the walk here, she said simply. Antonio looked at her. She hadn't said a word during the walk. She had been thinking the whole time. Padre Inácio made notes on a small piece of paper. He told Antonio to go to the edge plot that afternoon and count what was there. He told him to speak to 2 farmers in the village who might need the mules. He told him to come back in 1 week with numbers. Before they left, the old priest stood up and put a hand on Antonio's shoulder. Your father was a good man, he said quietly. He never asked for help either. He paused. Don't make the same mistake too long. Antonio gave a slow nod. He didn't trust his voice right then. They walked back in the early afternoon. The thin clouds were still there, still moving fast across the sky. The air smelled faintly of something, not rain, not yet, but the memory of rain, the way the earth remembered water even when there was none. They walked in silence for a while. Then Clara said, 90 days is enough. Antonio looked at her. Enough for what? For a lot of things, she said. She didn't explain further. But the way she said it, quiet and certain, like someone who had done the calculation and trusted the result, made him believe it. They reached the fence between the 2 farms. Antonio opened the gate, then stopped. Thank you, he said, for coming, for the mule's idea, for all of it. Clara looked at him for a moment. Something in her expression was different, a little more open. You're not alone in this valley, she said. You forgot that for a while, that's all. She walked through to her side of the fence. Antonio stood at the gate and watched her go. Then he turned and looked at his land, the cracked fields, the dry hills, the sky with its thin, fast clouds. 90 days. He walked to the edge plot near the creek. The soil there was darker, cooler. He crouched down and pressed his hand flat against the earth. It wasn't dead. It was just waiting. He stood up and looked at the line of bean plants along the creek edge. Small, dry, but still standing, still trying. He went back to the house, found a piece of paper and a pencil, and started to count. The rain came on a Wednesday. Not a gentle rain. Not the kind that arrives slowly, giving you time to prepare. It came all at once, a wall of water that fell out of a dark sky without warning, turning the dry ground into rivers in minutes. Antonio was in the edge plot near the creek when it started. He felt the first drops on the back of his neck and looked up. The sky to the north was black. Not dark blue, not gray. Black, the way the sky gets when it means what it's saying. He had just enough time to think. Finally. Then the rain hit. He stood there for a moment, letting it fall on him. The water was cold and heavy. It soaked through his shirt in seconds. He could feel the cracked ground under his boots softening, drinking, opening up. The smell of wet earth rose around him, that deep, old smell that farmers know like the smell of home. He closed his eyes. Then he remembered Clara. He ran. The creek between the two farms was already rising. Not dangerous yet, but moving fast, brown with dirt and leaves. He crossed at the shallow point, boots filling with water, and ran up to her house. She was on the porch, watching the rain with her arms crossed. She wasn't panicking, she was thinking. "The garden," he said, out of breath. "Already done," she said. "I put boards along the edges an hour ago when I saw the clouds building. It'll hold." He stopped. "You saw this coming?" She looked at him. "The air changed this morning," she said. "Didn't you feel it?" He hadn't. He had been too focused on the bean count, on the numbers for Padre Ignazio, on the letter he was writing to Diamantina. He should have felt it. His father would have felt it. "Come inside," Clara said. "This isn't going to stop soon." They sat at her kitchen table while the rain hit the roof hard. The sound was enormous, like the sky was trying to make up for months of silence all at once. Water ran off the edge of the porch in a solid curtain. Lightning flashed in the distance. Then thunder, low and rolling, like something moving underground. Clara put coffee on the stove. Her movements were calm, careful and fast. "How much rain is too much?" she asked without turning around. "For the bean plot, a few hours is fine," he said. "If it goes through the night, the creek might flood the lower edge." She gave a slow nod. "And your main fields?" He thought about it. The main fields were higher, drier. They needed rain badly, but cracked soil doesn't absorb fast. If too much came too quickly, it would run off without soaking in. "It's complicated," he said. She turned and looked at him. "Most important things are," she said. She put the coffee on the table and sat down across from him. Outside, the rain got stronger, if that was possible. The roof creaked. A small leak appeared in the corner of the kitchen, and Clara stood up, got a clay pot, and placed it underneath without breaking the conversation. "How are you feeling?" she asked. And she didn't mean the rain. He looked at his hands around the coffee cup. "Honestly?" "Yes," she said. "Honestly." He was quiet for a moment. "Scared," he said. "Not of losing the land. I've been scared of that for months. I mean, scared of what happens if we win." He looked up. "If the case in Diamantina works, if I keep the land, if the rain helps, then what?" "I start again. Same land, same work, older body, no family here to help." He paused. "Sometimes it's easier to be losing something than to think about starting over." Clara wrapped both hands around her cup. She looked at the table for a moment. "I know that feeling," she said quietly. "After my husband died, I had nothing. And I thought, as long as I have nothing, I can't lose anything more. It feels like a strange kind of safe." She looked up at him. "But it's not safe, it's just stopped." He looked at her. "Yes," he said, "exactly that. Stopped." She held his gaze. "You're not stopped, Antonio. You wrote the letters. You went to the village. You counted the beans." She paused. stopped. People don't count beans. He almost laughed. It came out as something close to a laugh, the first real one in a long time. Outside, something changed. The rain didn't stop, but it became lighter, steadier, less violent. The kind of rain that was settling in for a long stay. Good, slow rain, the kind that actually soaks into the ground. Antonio stood up and went to the door. He looked out at the fields, her garden, the fence between the two properties, the dark hills beyond. The water was everywhere, running in small rivers down the paths, pooling in the low spots, going deep into the earth. He watched it for a long time. Then he said, without turning around, "I don't want to do this alone anymore." The kitchen was quiet behind him, just the sound of rain and the small dripping of the leak into the clay pot. He turned around. Clara was looking at him. Not surprised, not nervous, just looking, the way she always looked. Steady and careful and completely honest. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said quickly. I don't mean that. Not yet. Maybe not ever, I don't know." He stopped. He was saying it wrong. He tried again. "I mean that these past weeks, having someone next door who talks straight and thinks clearly and doesn't pretend things are fine when they're not." He stopped again. "It's made a difference. A real difference. And I don't want to go back to before." Clara was quiet for a long moment. The rain fell steadily outside. "I'm not going anywhere," she said finally. Her voice was even, calm. But there was something underneath it, something that hadn't been there before, or that had been there but hidden. "I came here to try, I told you that, and I'm still trying." She looked at him carefully. "But Antonio, if you're saying what I think you're saying, that you want something more than neighbors, then you should know something about me first." He waited. "I don't do things halfway," she said. "If I stay, I stay. If I build something, I build it to last. I'm not interested in something that falls apart when the next hard season comes." She held his gaze. "So before you say anything else, make sure you mean it. Because I'll take you at your word." Antonio looked at her for a long moment. The woman who didn't waste water, who thought on the walk and said it after, who came to the village without being asked, who put boards around the garden an hour before the rain came because she felt the air change. "I mean it," he said. Something settled in her face. A quiet decision made. "Okay," she said. "Just that. Okay." But the way she said it, quiet and sure, like a seed going into good ground, was enough. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and deep and soaking into everything, all the way down to the roots. The rain lasted 3 days, not violent after that first night, just steady and patient, the kind of rain that doesn't make promises, just does the work. By the 3rd day, the creek had risen but not flooded. The main fields had absorbed more than Antonio expected. The bean plot was standing. Clara's garden was standing. Everything was still standing. On the 4th morning, the sky cleared. Not slowly, all at once, the way things sometimes change in the interior. 1 hour gray, the next hour blue. Clean and wide and full of light. Antonio walked his land before breakfast. He hadn't done that in months. Walked the whole property, corner to corner, the way his father taught him. Not to count or measure or worry, just to look, just to be there. The soil was different. Still cracked in places, but darker now, heavier. Alive in a way it hadn't been in a long time. In the main field, small green things were already pushing up through the mud. Weeds mostly, but where there were weeds, there could be crops. The earth was working again. He stopped in the middle of the field and looked around. His grandfather's land, his father's land, his land. He thought about the letter from Diamantina that had arrived 2 days before the rain. The man who knew the law had confirmed it in writing. 90 days. The timeline was wrong. The case was building. 3 other farmers in other valleys had added their names. The businessman's lawyer had already sent a response, which meant they were worried, which meant there was something real to fight. He thought about Padre Ignazio, reading every word carefully before he spoke. He thought about his father walking this same field in a bad year, not stopping, not complaining, just moving. He thought about Clara. He walked to the fence. She was already in the garden, crouching between the rows of tomato plants. The plants had doubled in size in 3 days of rain, small and green and reaching upward. She was checking the roots, pressing the soil gently around each one. She looked up when she heard him. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said. She looked at his face. "You walked the land." It wasn't a question. She could read it on him somehow. "Yes," he said. "And?" He thought about how to say it. He wasn't a man who used many words, but some things needed saying. "I think it's going to be all right," he said. "Not easy, but all right." She looked at him for a moment. Then something in her face settled, that same quiet decision, and she went back to the tomato plants. He watched her work for a moment. Then he said, "I'm going to plant the main field this week, corn and beans. If the rain holds, even part of the harvest will help." She didn't look up. "I'll help," she said. "My garden is done for now. I have time." He started to say she didn't have to. Then he stopped. He was learning. "Thank you," he said instead. She almost smiled. Almost. The weeks that followed were the hardest kind of hard. The kind where you work from before sunrise to after sunset and fall into bed without thinking and wake up and do it again. Antônio planted the main field with corn and beans. Clara helped for 3 days, working the rows beside him with the same quiet care she brought to everything. The mules he had rented out came back, and he used them to turn the soil in the lower plot. Padre Ignazio sent word from the village. The case in Diamantina was moving. The businessman's lawyers were pushing back, but the facts were clear. Wrong timelines, false notices, the same pattern repeated across many valleys. A judge in the city had agreed to review it. Nothing was decided yet, but it was moving. "Don't sign anything," Padre Ignazio's note said again. "And come to Sunday Mass. Let the people see you." Antônio went to Sunday Mass. Clara came with him. People noticed. Some nodded. Some looked away. Donna Perpetua from the house near the church, a woman who had not spoken to Antônio in 2 years, crossed the aisle after Mass and shook his hand. "Heard you're fighting for the water rights," she said with a rough voice. "Good. That man has been taking what isn't his for years." Antônio gave a slow nod. Donna Perpetua looked at Clara, looked at her carefully for 2 seconds, and gave one nod. Then she walked away. Clara leaned close to him as they walked out. "Who was that?" she asked quietly. "The most difficult woman in the valley," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "She seemed to like me," she said. Antônio looked at her. "Yes," he said. "She did." Clara almost smiled again. He was starting to know her almost smiles. There were different kinds. That one meant she was pleased, but wasn't going to say so. 2 months after the rain, the corn was growing. Not a full harvest. It was too late in the season for that. But enough. Enough to show the bank that the land was working, enough to show the judge in the city that this was a real farm. Enough to matter. The case was decided on a morning in late autumn. Antonio heard about it from the boy who ran messages between the village and the farms, the same barefoot boy who had brought Padre Inacio's first letter. He came running up the road with a folded paper and a smile too big for his face. Antonio read it standing at the gate. Then he read it again. The judge had ruled in favor of the farmers. The bank's notices were not valid. The debt timeline had been changed on purpose. The businessmen had been ordered to pay each farmer involved. It wasn't a large amount, not life-changing money, but it was enough to clear Antonio's debt entirely and leave something over. He stood at the gate for a long time. Then he walked to the fence. Clara was hanging washing on the line between two posts. She looked at him when she heard his boots. She saw his face. She put down the cloth she was holding and waited. He handed her the letter. She read it. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes did. Something moved in them, deep and quiet, like water settling after a long storm. She handed the letter back. "It's done," she said. "It's done," he said. They stood there for a moment, on either side of the fence, the letter in his hand, the washing moving slowly in the warm autumn wind. Then Antonio opened the gate and stepped through to her side. "I want to ask you something," he said. She looked at him. Steady, waiting. "You said you don't do things halfway," he said. "That if you build something, you build it to last." He held her gaze. "I want to build something that lasts, with you. On this land, a real life, not just two people on either side of a fence helping each other survive." Clara looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "I told you I'd take you at your word." "Yes," he said. "So ask me properly." He took a breath. "Clara Mendes," he said quietly. "Will you stay? Not will you marry me? Not a big speech. Just that. The most honest question he knew how to ask. The one that said everything without needing more words." She looked at him. The land was green behind him. Not fully. There were still dry patches, still work to do, still hard seasons ahead. But green. Growing. Trying. "Yes," she said. "Simple. Certain. Like good rain on ready ground." They didn't have a celebration that day. There was too much work for that, and neither of them was the celebrating type. But that evening, after supper, they sat together on the porch and watched the sky turn orange and red, and then slowly dark. The land was quiet around them. The corn moved in the light wind. Somewhere down by the creek, a night bird called. Antonio thought about everything that had happened in the last months. The bank letter on a Tuesday morning, the dead fields, the walk to the fence, not knowing why he was going, the well, the coffee, the village, the rain, the letter from the boy with the too big smile, and Clara at the center of all of it, not rescuing him, not being rescued, just there, steady and honest and trying, the same as him. He reached over and put his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. She turned her hand over and held his. They sat like that as the dark came in. Two people who had lost a great deal and found, in the same dry valley at the same hard time, that what they had left was enough to build something real. The land was still his, and he was no longer alone on it. That, in the end, was the harvest that mattered. Antonio kept his land. Clara stayed. And the valley was no longer quiet. That's our story for today. If it touched you in some way, share it with someone. And if you want more slow English stories like this one, subscribe, We have a new story every week. Thank you for listening. See you next time.